Here's a headline. It was political. That is what the former lawyer for Stormy Daniels and former Playboy model Karen McDougal is now saying about these controversial hush money payments that he originally negotiated. Now, there's a lot in here, but you may remember the name. Keith Davidson was the lawyer before Michael Avenatti, and he says it was the release of the now infamous Access Hollywood tape that changed everything.
The Access Hollywood tape was the motivating factor in this case actually resolving. It defeats the argument that this was done for purely personal reason and that this was in fact done for political reasons, because after the Access Hollywood tape, that something like this could be the straw that broke the camel's back.
You might say, of course it was political, or who cares? But this all matters now because it goes back to the crime that Michael Cohen confessed to. Donald Trump continues to mount a defense claiming that those payments were personal and not political, meaning you wouldn't get in trouble with campaign law. Now, Cohen's going to jail because he pled guilty to, yes, a campaign finance violation. And this man who was on the other side of the table with Cohen, Davidson, isn't necessarily in the clear either. Congress wants to hear from him. He's also on that now famous list of 81 people that the House Judiciary is investigating. He's also facing separate allegations that he originally colluded against his own clients with Cohen. That's a claim he denies. We've covered it on the show. But in this new interview, he is dishing on how friendly he and Cohen were. Davidson says Cohen confided in him about being upset that he didn't even get, wait for it, a role in the White House, which, of course, is also interesting because whatever one thinks of Michael Cohen, this is one of the issues that have come up in whether or not he's being 100% truthful about.
He confided in me that he was just beside himself, and in his words, he said, can you believe it? After everything I've done, he's not taking me to Washington. Can you
believe it? Well, many people say, yeah, you work hard for Donald Trump. Doesn't necessarily get returned. Now, how central is the Access Hollywood tape? A former Fox reporter is also trying to get out of an NDA after reports that Fox killed the story on that before the election because Rupert Murdoch was trying to put a thumb on the scale and get Trump to win, releasing a statement that says, the quote, the public has a right to know the truth. Fox News has denied this. Davidson today also weighing in, telling ABC the Fox reporter called him for comment right after the Access Hollywood tape came out with factually specific details that might have informed that story, which didn't originally run. Here with me now exclusively is the lawyer for that former Fox reporter, Nancy Erika Smith, a leading civil rights lawyer who also represented Gretchen Carlson in a sexual harassment lawsuit against former Fox News CEO Roger Ailes. I'm also joined by David Dorsen, a former SDNY prosecutor and former chief counsel of the Senate Watergate Committee, who knows a thing or two about investigating political crimes. Thanks to each of you for being here. Nancy, before we get deep into the details, what do you think of what Mr. Davidson, whatever his credibility, the core of what he's saying, does that help the case against Trump? Because it seems like another person corroborating that this was campaign related.
It absolutely does, and the timing does as well. When you're talking about mid-October, weeks before the election, you're talking about something that could clearly affect an election. Obviously, Trump thought that, and there are witnesses who spoke to Jane Mayer at The New Yorker who indicate that Murdoch knew that as well. That's why the story was killed, according to Jane Mayer at The New Yorker.
Although they deny that.
They deny it, but it's really easy. This is simple. Maybe the Congress should subpoena my client and all of her records. And then we will see exactly what Fox News had.
Have you and your client been contacted by, say, House Judiciary or oversight?
Not yet, but a subpoena will trump an NDA.
So you're making a little bit of news here, which is why we like exclusive guests. You're saying that your former Fox News reporter,
Diana Falzone,
is bound legally by this NDA contract unless and until it's vitiated by the courts.
Or she gets a subpoena.
Or a lawful subpoena, which you're saying would override it anyway.
Absolutely.
So you're saying if, we just had a congressman earlier in the show, if one of these congresspersons wanted to subpoena your client with the power of the House, that would, you say, deliver what? What value would that add?
That would add, it would add to the investigation of whether Fox is really a news organization, or whether it is a campaign arm of Donald Trump, or whether just killing this story was an illegal campaign contribution worth what? Obviously, they thought it was worth something if it happened. He won the Electoral College by 78,000 votes. Would 78,000 so-called evangelicals have thought differently about him if they knew about an affair and a payoff money with a porn star? Possibly.
I almost get the feeling you're like an effective lawyer with a long-term strategy here.
Thank you.
David, you know your way around the congressional investigative process. Nancy knows a lot, but also has a client here, so she has an agenda and an interest. Do you fundamentally think in your independent analysis that this is a proper and fruitful avenue for the House Democrats? What's your reaction to what she just said and the story?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a very important part of the picture. And I think it's also a very important part of the picture for the Southern District of New York. And I think that's where the action's going to be. For one reason, as a prosecutor, I could get income tax returns. So the Southern District of New York may be sitting there with Trump's income tax returns. And what's going on, when Trump paid Cohn to reimburse him for the payments to Stormy Daniels, he listed that as retainer and presumably deducted those payments. That deduction.
You know, I get excited when you start talking about tax deduction, David.
Well, it's a subject that bores a lot of people, but when it comes to Donald Trump, it may be part of his downfall because he deducted those payments to Michael Cohen.
But is this like, are you basically imagining an Al Capone situation where after everything that's happened, he gets in trouble for tax deductions?
Perhaps. And because, for one thing, Trump could pardon himself, but he couldn't pardon himself for violating state law. And the income tax returns that he filed on behalf of for the state would be false because he presumably deducted the payments to Michael Cohen.
Well, David, take a listen to the way the White House is handling this, deflecting basically on Cohen, a problem that won't seem to go away. Take a look.
Why did the president write a check to Michael Cohen for $35,000 in August of 2017? He testified about this. He specifically accused the president of engaging in a conspiracy to conceal campaign finance violations. He presented the check.
The president's been clear that there wasn't a campaign violation. Beyond that, I can't get in.
He didn't know about these hush money.
Beyond that, I can't.
His story has changed.
Again, I would refer you back to the president's comments.
David, your view of their struggle to even explain what is corroborated, which is these payments for, again, an NDA that they literally sued Stormy over, again, which was their way of corroborating they paid for.
Well, I don't really know what they're talking about because the payments are documented now with checks. I think they're doing gobbledygook, as in Watergate, where hush money was an important part of the picture and ultimately, I think, was the downfall of the cover-up. I think that these payments are going to be very, very important.
Interesting. And that's interesting coming from your Watergate experience and SDNY. Before we go, Nancy, I do want to make sure we're clear here because this is a dispute. And I want to read to you what a Fox executive says about this, which is, quote, Daniels and her associates were actually playing a bizarre cat and mouse game with Fox News and other outlets, trying to get their story out without fingerprints and ultimately without enough proof to publish. Isn't that a fair defense for journalistic outlets that say they needed to be sure before they went with something?
Journalistic outlets wouldn't have to keep reporters who had the story under an NDA if they wanted the truth to come out, would they? And presidential candidates should not be able to hide information from the American public with NDAs.
So are you saying if that defense is true, it might be valid, and your formal contention here is not that they don't have a good argument to discuss, but that they're actually trying to prevent the discussion of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
I think that makes sense. And I think the point you raised about the House is certainly interesting. Nancy, Erika Smith, and David Dorsen, thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.